Hi, everyone. My name is Tanya Hertz, and I am Assistant Professor of Entrepreneurship and Business Management at San Diego Miramar College and San Diego State University. So tonight we're going to be talking about entrepreneurship, and we are going to focus on really what it takes to be an entrepreneur, the life of an entrepreneur, and talk about some of the basics of entrepreneurship or an overview of entrepreneurship. So I'm going to share a video with you. So let me go ahead and share that with you now. And may not have exactly the same slides as yours, but I just wanted to make sure that you have something to look at while I'm talking. So before we jump into it, entrepreneurship is growing, and I wanted to give you just one of the numbers based on a new research study that I thought was really interesting. 50% of all working adults by the year 2020 will be engaged in some form of entrepreneurship. So working for themselves in some way. So an entrepreneur is different than an employee, and then an entrepreneur has some sort of ownership of his or her business. And entrepreneurship is growing. When you ask millennials and Gen Z, 70% of them say that they want to be an entrepreneur someday. So what do we mean by entrepreneurship and by small business? Well, if we look at the SBA's definition, it's actually not a very small business. They say a small business is any business with 500 or fewer employees, which actually is a pretty large business. But if you use their definition, 27.8 million businesses are small businesses in the United States. That represents about 99.7% of all of the businesses that there are. But that's a pretty large definition. If you actually go down and look at businesses that are truly small, businesses with 20 or fewer employees, 90% of all businesses in the US have 20 or fewer employees. And they're moving into all different aspects of business. Every industry you see new entrepreneurial businesses. One thing that you see a lot more of the owners have college degrees now. So 50% of all entrepreneurs have a college degree. Compare that to back in 2000 when only about 32% had college degrees. There are also increased opportunities for minorities, for women in entrepreneurship, for veterans. When you ask the veterans, there's 23.5 million veterans in the United States. 1/4 of them say that they want to be an entrepreneur at some point in their lives. So what do we define small business as? We in entrepreneurship say that if we're going to call it a small business, it actually has to have 100 or fewer employees. 500 employees is pretty large. So the SBA, the IRS, they can say that's small, but for the purposes of entrepreneurship, usually 100 or fewer is the cutoff. And we have a lot of different types of entrepreneurial businesses that we'll talk about. One of the ones that usually comes to mind when we talk of entrepreneurship is a startup. So a startup goes by many names. Sometimes you hear them called high potential ventures or high growth ventures or gazelles, sometimes they're called. Now these are very, very profitable businesses. These are the kind of businesses that tend to receive venture capital backing. In order to be qualified as a startup gazelle, you have to have revenue that increases by 20% annually for 4 years with a starting capital base or starting revenue base of $100,000. So these are very high growth. These are very profitable, and they're very rare. So gazelles comprise only 4% of all U.S. companies. But they account for 70% of all of the new job growth in the United States. So you can see why the government really allocates resources towards small business. Small business is the backbone of our economy. Entrepreneurship is the backbone of our economy. So more of the businesses that are entrepreneurial or account for the largest portion of the businesses out there are really the attractive small firms. These are firms that are still very profitable. Some of them can reach to the millions or even tens of millions of dollars in revenue. They're just this is the vast majority of all of the businesses. They are, they're profitable for their owners. They're the kind of businesses that tend to be in the public perception. And then the third type of business are the really small businesses, the micro businesses or the lifestyle businesses. And these are called, again, many different things, but micro businesses tend to be very, very small. These are the kind of businesses that give enough money to just kind of pay the bills, allow the owners to live, but don't really grow very big. So a lifestyle business is a type of micro business. These are usually started by people who want to do a certain thing in their lives, don't want to have a boss, don't want to have a traditional job, but want to start a company. Don't usually grow very big. They're micro businesses. So an example of this, I actually had some students who started a micro business. They were surfers and living here in Southern California, San Diego, and they wanted to surf every day. That was their goal. They said, we just want to make enough money to pay the bills, live in San Diego, and surf every day. So they started a surf school, and they're doing just that. They're doing very well. Micro businesses are localized geographically, except for their marketing, because typically marketing is not geographically localized because of the technology, the internet, right? When we put things out there, it's everywhere. Typically the financing is from one supplier, usually his or her own money, or it could be a small group of people. But they do have the potential to grow quite a bit larger than that. So entrepreneurs are excellent at exploiting opportunities. And when we're talking about entrepreneurial opportunities, these are opportunities that are economically attractive. They're timely. This is the right time to open them. And they create value. They make money for the buyers, and they create value for the end users. Typically, they solve a problem for the customers. A lot of new businesses are started based on or by opportunities that are recognized based on trends. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. So an entrepreneur comes from a French word meaning anyone who undertakes risk. And that's basically what an entrepreneur does. They recognize opportunities and they take risk. Even if they're starting the business with other people's money, which is rare. Usually most entrepreneurs at least put in some of their own money. They're still risking their own time, and most of them are risking their own money as well. But usually they're doing the things that they do with very little money. Entrepreneurs are very good at maximizing the resources that they have and utilizing other people's resources to help their businesses to grow. And we call this bootstrapping, right? Doing more with less, finding ways to make your business work with not a whole heck of a lot of money, finding ways to use other people's resources, so get people to work for you in exchange for the promise of future equity, or using on-campus space for your initial office location so you don't have to pay for rent, or doing whatever you can to make it happen. We call that bootstrapping. So there's been a lot of research over the last 30 years on what a typical entrepreneur looks like. And there is no typical entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs look like you, and they look like me, and they look like everybody. You can be from any background and be an entrepreneur, any age and be an entrepreneur. And in fact, a lot of people don't realize that the average age that an entrepreneur starts his or her first business is actually 40 years old. So a lot older than we usually think of. Not that 40 is old, right? But there are some common traits that we do see amongst successful entrepreneurs. And a lot of these traits that are described here on this slide are not necessarily, not always ingrained in us, or they're not, we're not born with these traits, but these traits can be developed, they can be learned, and they can grow. So we do see that most successful entrepreneurs are very committed. They tend to be very determined. They tend to be excellent leaders. And they are also great at building teams. They're very honest in their relationship. They're not autocratic leaders who who demand people to follow their way. They're actually good at delegated. They tend to be very obsessed with opportunities. They're aware of the needs of the market. They pay attention to consumers and to markets and to trends, and they're always thinking of ideas for new businesses. Always thinking, how can I solve this problem with a business? How could I make something better? They're noticing changes and thinking of exploiting them with a business. Where other people see problems, entrepreneurs see opportunities. They tend to be tolerant of risk, but that does not mean that they love risk. They're risk tolerant, but they also are risk minimizers. Right? They'll take risks, but they don't. Usually, there's their own money involved, so they don't want to lose that money. So they are good at minimizing risk. They're tolerant of ambiguity. They don't need everything spelled out for them. They figure it out themselves. They're very creative, self-reliant. They tend to actually be a lot smarter than the general population. When you give cognitive ability tests to entrepreneurs, they tend to score very high in cognitive ability. They're smart people. They're the kind of people who get things done. They do what they say they're going to do. They set goals for themselves. They're just motivated kind of people. Now, a lot of entrepreneurs, it takes, like I said, all kinds of people are entrepreneurs. And if you're lacking in one of these qualities, remember, you can build these up through practice. You can get better at these kinds of things. And also, more and more, we see that entrepreneurial ventures, new companies, are not started by sole individuals. About 82% of all new companies are started with teams of people rather than with individuals. So how we know what it takes to succeed. How can you fail? Well, you can overestimate your abilities. You can jump into a market that you don't understand, or try to reach too large of a market. The worst thing that you can say as an entrepreneur, one of the worst things that you can say, or that I hear entrepreneurs say, is, oh, my target market is everyone. I'm going to reach everyone. There's no way that you can start a new business with that large of a target market. We need narrow niche target markets that we understand, we know them very well, and that we can dominate, we can excel, we can develop a relationship with, and then we can grow. Then eventually everyone, but never in the beginning. You really want to be careful about the people that you hire. It is so important to hire the right people. The best advice I ever heard was from Jennifer Barnes, who's the CEO of an accounting firm here in San Diego. And she told me, hire slowly, fire fast. And that is the best advice I've ever received. It's so true. Be really careful about who you hire. Hire the right people. And if they're not working out, get rid of them. You need to be a team player. If you want to do everything yourself, you will fail, because it's just not possible. Although we end up doing a lot of things ourselves as an entrepreneur, you tend to wear many hats as an entrepreneur, but you need to know how to delegate. You have to be a team player. You have to be open. You have to be collaborative. You don't want to be autocratic, type A, domineering manager. And you also want to make sure that when you're sharing ownership in your company, that you're doing it in a fair and equitable way. I recommend, if you haven't read this book, it's called Slicing Pie. I can't remember the author right now off the top of my head, but that's an excellent book about, it tells you how to divide the equity in the company based on a fair system of inputs, rather than just many other ways that people come up with to divide equity. Okay, so there are many varieties of entrepreneur. We usually think of entrepreneur as the lone ranger, the true entrepreneur, the founder, but this isn't always the case. There are lots of different kinds, but a founder is somebody who actually starts a new business, not somebody who becomes an entrepreneur by buying a business or a franchise or by inheriting a business. And a second stage entrepreneur is, they're not necessarily even entrepreneurs, but they're called second stage because they're the managers that come into a very new venture, and they come in so early in the game that they act like entrepreneurs, whether or not they actually have any ownership of the companies. But they do all the things that pure entrepreneurs do. They share a lot of the characteristics. They wear many hats. They juggle many things at the same time, and so we call those second stage. A franchisee is a type of entrepreneur who buys a business from a franchise, and they enter into a franchise agreement. We'll talk more about franchises later, or if you want to know more about them, definitely reach out to me. But it takes a different, there's a different personality type that likes franchises for entrepreneurship. There are restrictions set upon you. There's not as much freedom because of the contracts that you go into. The contractual relationship in a franchise can be limiting, but it's still entrepreneurship, and there's still a great way to be an entrepreneur and also to minimize risk a little bit. There's less risk with a franchise than with a brand new startup. So like I said, more and more companies are starting as with teams, right? 82% of all businesses are started in teams. And the reason that most entrepreneurs do this is because it also cuts risk down quite a bit. When you start with another person, you get different viewpoints, different ideas, more better ways of solving problems. You get a diverse, a diverse group of people working on the same problems, and so you get better solutions. Now, when you're starting a company as a team, and also when you're hiring people in the beginning, you don't want to bring in people that match your personality type. You want to bring in people that balance you out, that fill in the holes in your knowledge, skills, abilities, what you know and who you know. Bring in people who can complement you rather than just mimic you, right? So we know that 32%, according to the SBA, 30% of new businesses fail within the first 2 years. We know that 50% fail within the first 5 years. And how many fail within the first 10 years? I think it's 66%. 66% fail within the first 10 years. So you can cut down that risk of failure by starting a business as a team. That risk goes way down when you start with more people. So there's another kind of entrepreneur called a social entrepreneur. These are the kind of people who are starting companies to solve a social problem. Just because their goal is to solve society's problems does not mean that's their only goal or that they don't make money. Typically, most social entrepreneurs do make money. They have the triple bottom line approach, where they are focused on people, profits, and planet, rather than just the traditional profits. So I just wanted to clarify that not all social entrepreneurs are nonprofit, or start nonprofits rather, but they do solve society's problems. There are a lot more women in entrepreneurship, more and more women than ever before. We know that women are starting to enter all different fields of entrepreneurship. They're founding very profitable businesses. They're growing these businesses, and we know that almost 9 million of the privately held firms in the United States are women-owned. So when we say women-owned, it means that at least 51% of the company is owned by women. These are successful businesses. These are the only businesses that had a net increase in employment between 1997 and 2013. The industries where we see the most new women-owned firms are healthcare and educational services, but we are seeing them in many different industries, and they are profitable. So, and some of them are getting really big. So we know that 1 in 5 of the $1 million firms, or firms that make $1 million or more per year, are owned by women. But most of the new firms that are started by women are actually smaller. Only 4.2% of those firms that are owned by women are actually those $1 million firms. We're seeing a lot more women of color starting new ventures. We're seeing a lot more minorities in general starting new companies. And the reason why we didn't see this so much in the past was because there just wasn't a lot of role models for women to follow, or people of color. There wasn't a lot of mentors. There wasn't a lot of there wasn't, well, there wasn't almost any available financing for women. There was this sort of good old boy mentality in a lot of the VC firms where we saw they just weren't backing women firms. So when we survey women, 80% of them said that they started their new business entirely using their own money and nobody else's. And that's a lot more than men. 68% of men said that they only had to rely on their own financing to start the company. So that's starting to change. It's a slow process. We're seeing more women, so then there's more mentors, and then that means more women, and so it's changing. It's slow to change, but it's changing. So no matter what, if you're starting a business, even if you are starting a micro business, any small business owner can think like an entrepreneur. And to think like an entrepreneur, you really want to be intentional about your goals. Look for opportunities that have growth potential. Challenge yourself, dream big, try to find, don't just start a company like every other company out there. When you're starting a company, really find a way to fill that need that isn't previously being fulfilled. Solve a problem. Find a way to differentiate your business. Find a way to show that you have a core competency, something different than what everybody else is doing. Just doing it differently so that they have a reason to come to you and to buy from you. So people start entrepreneurship for many, or start to become entrepreneurs or become entrepreneurs, start new business for many, many, many different reasons. Money alone is not the best reason. If you just are starting a new business because you want money and there's no underlying passion or concern, that's not a great thing to do. If you want an easy route, entrepreneurship is not the right path for you. It's challenging, it's difficult, it can be stressful, but it can create tremendous wealth that you can pass down to your family. You can also have a huge impact on the world, a tremendous impact on the world and your employees and society just by starting a new company. In fact, that's one of the fastest ways I can think of to make a huge, lasting, impactful difference on the world. And it can be extremely personally satisfying and provide meaning in your life. But you need to ask yourself, are you passionate about this product or service? Chances are you will be working a lot of long hours, and you have to have some risk tolerance. If you are highly risk averse, you don't like taking risks, don't go into entrepreneurship because it's a risky business. You have to be very tolerant for ambiguity. You have to be good at making decisions and be willing to wear a lot of hats and have a lot of people's lives in your hands. And have you heard that saying, with great power comes great responsibility? So true. You have to be willing to take on the responsibilities and do it in such a way that you're not going to burn yourself out and succumb to the stress, the inevitable stress of entrepreneurship. So if you are the kind of person who is very highly stressed, you might want to think of a different career path. So there are different kinds of entrepreneurs, and people become entrepreneurs for different reasons. We call somebody who becomes an entrepreneur because of financial hardship a reluctant entrepreneur. These are people who start companies or usually they don't start companies. Usually they work in the gig economy. So the gig economy is, you're still an entrepreneur. I mean, you're still starting your own business, but it's not a traditional company. Maybe they drive for Uber, right? The gig economy is the economy in which we're temporary workers or contract workers, short-term work, Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, things like that. Now, corporate refugee is a little different. This is a person who becomes an entrepreneur because they don't like something about the corporate environment. Maybe they don't like the fact that they are smarter than everyone around them, but they can never move up in the company because of the glass ceiling. You see a lot of women and minorities are corporate refugees. Or maybe they aren't getting enough challenge in their work. There's not excitement. There's not passion about what they do at their current corporate job. And maybe it might be as simple as they just don't want to work for somebody else, right? They don't want to have a boss, right? So there, typically it falls into there's typically four categories which entrepreneurs fall into, and it has to do with whether they're doing this by choice or out of necessity, and whether it's their primary income or supplemental income. And we categorize them the different ways. The people who are doing it as their primary income and they're doing it by choice, those are the free agents. The casual earners are doing it by their choice, but it's their supplemental income, and that's the vast majority of all entrepreneurs. And the people doing it out of necessity, like I said, we have the reluctant entrepreneurs, and then those people who are just financially strapped and doing it on the side, and they might be just driving for Lyft on weekends, or just renting their house out on Airbnb every once in a while, and it's not their primary income. That's only about 16% of all entrepreneurs. So there's four primary motivations for founding a company. And then within those four motivations, there's reasons behind them. And let me go through and talk about each of the four one by one. First of all, people start their own businesses or become entrepreneurs for personal fulfillment, right? They want to make a difference. They want to have a sense of belonging, or they want satisfaction in their life. They want to be challenged. They want to do something that they're passionate about, or they want to do something where they can be really looked up to and respected, and have a sense of recognition and status with their job. There's not a lot of other things that you can do where you can be a millionaire within a couple of years. And I've had so many former students who've started companies in my classes, and now they're millionaires or multimillionaires, and they're very young. They're very young. There's the desire for independence, being your own boss, and then, of course, the financial rewards. You cannot discount financial rewards. There is something pretty cool about being able to make as much money as you want. We're in America. There's no cap on how much money you can earn. Nobody will say to you, I'm sorry, you've earned enough money. It's time to stop now. You can make as much money as you can make. And in entrepreneurship, how much you make is directly correlated with how hard you work. So you can do some good things. All right. Beyond that, it takes, you also should understand your own personal paradigm or personality type when going into entrepreneurship, because it takes different personalities to make a company run. And often all three of these personalities are within one person, but more often than not, it takes a team of people, and you can balance what each of the people knows to make sure each of the people knows and the way that each person is to make sure that the business is effective. So the three personality types are technician, manager, and entrepreneur personalities. The technician are the kind of people who are more short-term oriented. They are comfortable doing what they know. And those people are important. They're the ones who work and get things done. Manager type personalities are very pragmatic. They tend to be better at delegating authority, though, than technicians. They're the kind of people who figure out what needs to be done and the order and the planning, and then they delegate that to the right person. They're good with organization, right? That's why they work in organizations. But they are a little short-term thinking. They again also are much more comfortable doing what they know than with ambiguity, which the entrepreneur personality is good at. They're very comfortable with ambiguity. They don't care if they've never done it before. They know they can figure out how to do it. They look at the business from 1,000-foot perspective. They are visionary. They see ahead. They see what can happen, what can be done. And it takes, like I said, all three types if you want a successful business. So by and large, we know that small firms do not have the advantage over large firms. It is the big companies that have the advantage in terms of almost everything. But there are some competitive advantages that entrepreneurial or new small firms have, and we'll go through each one of them one by one. First of all, we have, as a new business owner, the advantage in being able to well, take advantage of the fact that consumers, they tend to trust us more. They think that we are more likely to act with integrity and responsibility, and than large, big, evil corporations. And so, as long as we don't let them down and don't break their trust, we should take advantage of the fact that they have this ingrained idea of our reputation being honest and integrity, and acting with integrity. We have the advantage of being focused on our customer because there's a small number of them, so we can have a better relationship with them, so we can know them well and create loyalty within that niche. We also tend to have an advantage in quality, not always, but because we're smaller, we can have a better control over what we make and make sure that we do it right. So quality tends to go to the entrepreneur. We tend to be much more innovative in small companies. We're better at innovating. We can get innovations to market much, much quicker because there aren't all those levels of bureaucracy like you see in large companies that ideas need to go through. And we have the advantage in that we target niche markets. We can shield ourselves from notice of the big companies by targeting a very niche initial target market, or niche, some people say. They've heard that saying, there's riches in niches. That's so true. When you first start your company, you really should have a narrow initial target market, and it should be one or maybe two, but usually one is even better, so that you can get into that market, dominate that market, get to know your customers very well. They get to know you very well. You can reach them easier, and then you can expand, all with hopefully without much notice from the big companies who aren't as likely to target those niche markets. All right, here's a list of some resources that can be useful to new entrepreneurs. All of us should know about them. The SBA is a great resource for grants, loans. They don't give loans to new businesses, but to small businesses, existing businesses. And they aren't even really giving the loans, they're just backing the loans, and they put you in touch with the right people, but still great resource. SBDC on the bottom there. If you, they're better for brand new businesses. If you want me to put you in touch with somebody, reach out to me. I'd be happy to do that. You just let me know. I think those of you who are in the class this semester, we're going to have a representative. The director is going to be coming from our local SBDC, and you can meet with him, Sudarshan, if you'd like. Another resource, SCORE is a great resource. That's Service Corps of Retired Executive and Entrepreneurs is the SCORE, and that's a great resource for mentors or for writing business plans. Kauffman Foundation is great for research and entrepreneurship. There's lots of great resources. Take advantage. You have great resources available to you right now as an entrepreneur who's a student, so take advantage of those resources. And also keep in mind, you are not just starting a business, but you're creating a legacy. You're creating something that you can pass down both to your heirs and to society. You have the ability to choose what you do. I mean, all of us choose what we do with our very short time on this planet. So why not choose to do something amazing? When you're an entrepreneur, you can do whatever you want. Your company can be however you want it to be. That's up to you. As long as it's legal, it's ethical, you can do just about anything. So do something that you love. Think about what would make your life better and make everyone else's life better, and do it. I know you can. Good luck to you. Take care.